We are now in week 5 of the Israel-Hamas war. As of Sunday night, more than 70 trucks carrying aid have been able to enter Gaza. On board were health supplies, bottled water, blankets, tents, and hygiene products, but no fuel. And the UN is warning the shortage of fuel could shut down all aid work in Gaza by tomorrow. Juliette Touma is the Director of Communications for the UN agency that oversees the Palestinian territories. We've reached her in Jerusalem. Juliette, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David.
So as we speak, you're very close to running out of fuel. What happens when UNRWA runs completely dry?
A humanitarian crisis that has been looming will become a catastrophe in a couple of days when UNRWA, which is the largest humanitarian organization working in the Gaza Strip, will run out of fuel. We will not be able to bring in assistance to 800,000 people who are sheltering in our facilities. We will not be able to drive trucks to the border with Egypt and pick up very basic supplies that are coming into Gaza. We will not be able to send any fuel to the water pumping stations in our shelters. We were supporting bakeries, for example, with wheat flour. We won't be able to do that. And we were supporting medical facilities as well. So fuel has been used over the past 1 month as a weapon of war, in addition to water and food. We are running out of fuel. We've been asking for urgent deliveries of fuel, but our calls have been falling on deaf ears.
So we've heard concerns about a lack of fuel almost since the beginning of this conflict. So how has UNRWA and others been able to maintain even the level of service you've had right now if fuel has been in short supply for weeks? What measures have you had?
We've rationed.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. We took some measures. We took some very difficult decisions. We've rationed the use of the fuel, including for our own vehicles, but we delivered, for example, less fuel to medical facilities. We delivered less fuel to the bakeries that we were supporting with our wheat flour. So there were some decisions like that, but we were also able, through coordination with the Israeli authorities, to access existing supplies of fuel that are inside the Gaza Strip. Last week, we did the last round, and even that depot has now emptied up. And this is why we're asking once again for the urgent delivery of fuel. You see all these trucks that have been coming into Gaza with basic supplies like food and drinking water and pharmaceuticals and other basic items did not have any fuel. So we really need fuel because it has been almost 5 weeks now with no fuel, not to UNRWA and not to any other humanitarian organization inside the Gaza Strip.
So obviously there's an acute focus on what happens in the hospitals if they run out of fuel. We've talked to many people about incubators shutting off and ventilators shutting off and just operating rooms not having electricity to function. But we're also talking about water pumps. We're talking about sanitation, removing of waste, ambulances off the road. It's sort of down to that level where even those fundamental basic services, by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, would have to stop? What's your sense of when things are completely exhausted?
I think in a few days. I mean, it's very hard to be scientific onto when everything will shut down because it depends on the fuel stock of each of these organizations, right? So there's no scientific accurate answer to this. What we do know is that there's no shipment of fuel, and it has been 5 weeks with no shipments of fuel. I mean, this is a place where 2.2 million people live. How can any place in the world function if there is no fuel?
So 2.2 million people live in Gaza, at least at the start of this conflict. You say about 800,000 of them are now in shelters. What will happen in your shelters when the gas runs out?
The places where people have come and sought refuge, mainly the UNRWA buildings, they are overcrowded. I mean, we have reports that hundreds of people are sharing one toilet, as an example. Sanitary conditions are absolutely appalling. We do not have enough supplies to cater to the needs of people. People have come to the UNRWA facilities because they trust UNRWA, because they know UNRWA, because they were asking for protection and safety under the UN flag. But we do not have the supplies to give to everyone in need, because we had planned for much, much less people. Even in our worst scenario planning, we planned for 1/4 of the number of people who are now in our shelters.
So clearly, you need cooperation from Israel to get fuel into the Gaza Strip. We've seen the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations say that many of the 100+ workers in your organization who have been killed may in fact have been part of Hamas. Given that posture and given the security concerns of Israel, is there any hope that you can get fuel in through the Rafah crossing? Do you think Israel might allow it at this point?
First of all, let me affirm that our colleagues, all our colleagues who work with UNRWA in the Gaza Strip and anywhere in the region, these are United Nations workers. Since the war began, 102 of my colleagues have been killed in Gaza. These are colleagues who were teachers, who were doctors, who were engineers, who were school principals, who were support staff. Normally, what happens with UNRWA is when we recruit people, they go through a vetting and screening process. And then UNRWA shares the lists every single year of all our staff members with the host governments across the region and with the state of Israel as an occupying power. Today, around the world, the UN flags everywhere in the world was taken to half-mast in recognition of the memory of these colleagues that we lost, and in recognition and in memory for the service that they have done, some of them for decades on end, for the Palestinian communities in the Gaza Strip.
No, I appreciate that. It's important to know that they're vetted and green-lit before they can do that, and the list is shared with Israel, because the ambassador's comments certainly caught people's attention. But have you gotten any sense on whether they'll be flexible on letting fuel supplies in, or is it still the same hard line that they're worried it'll be diverted by Hamas and used for military objectives?
Look, David, the United Nations, UNRWA, the agency where I work, we are asking for fuel for humanitarian purposes so that we're able to continue to undertake the humanitarian obligation that we were entrusted with by the member states. We are asking for the fuel. And so we need fuel. And where we stand right now is that our barrels are emptying completely. And if we do not get fuel, we will not be able to continue to deliver humanitarian assistance to people in need. UNRWA will not be able to deliver humanitarian assistance to people in need.
We've seen the images coming out of the hospitals, Al-Shifa in particular, over the weekend. We've heard of babies dying because there wasn't enough electricity for incubators. What happens to the hospitals of Gaza if this fuel embargo doesn't change?
They will stop functioning. Many of them have already, because of the siege and because of the war. But more will stop functioning. Al-Shifa is the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip. It is also, in addition to it being a hospital, it's also hosting tens of thousands of people in its parking lots and in its courtyards. We at UNRWA have been able to access Shifa only once in the past 5 weeks, and we did not even deliver fuel. We were not allowed to deliver fuel. We delivered with the World Health Organization some medicine and basic emergency supplies. In 1 month, this is what we were able to do.
Juliette Touma, I want to offer my condolences on the loss of your colleagues, and I want to thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you speaking with us today.
Thank you, David.